Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is the place writers like to gather, and we talk about writing, all things writers, for writers, and by writers. So we're really glad to see you here today, or if you're taking the time to watch the replay, thank you very much for joining us today. My name's Jean Wise. I'm one of the co-hosts, and I'm joined by my trusty partners in this, Johnny Alexander. Why don't you wave, Johnny? She's our fiction expert. And my other nonfiction expert and marketing expert, Bethany Jett. So hi, you guys. Welcome today. And Bethany, I believe you're going to introduce our special guest and our topic today. So take it away, Bethany.
Yes, and it is truly a pleasure to have Caroline George with us today. This is a treat. So I'm super excited to hear everything that she has to say. Her bio is one of my favorite bios ever, and so I'm going to read it because I loved it so much. So here we go. Caroline George is a multi-award-winning author of YA fiction. Her latest book, Dearest Josephine, releases from Thomas Nelson HarperCollins, February 2021. She graduated from Belmont University with a degree in publishing and public relations. That's awesome. And she now travels the country, speaking at conferences and writing full-time. And she's from Georgia, so I'm going to pick some stuff out here. And she aspires to be on the Great British Baking Show, which is one of my favorite shows ever. And I hope you make that. And her motto is copy first, save the world later. And you guys are absolutely going to want to follow her on Instagram. I'm going to throw it in the chat so you get her link. She is doing the author, writer, bookstagram the right way. It's awesome. So Caroline, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Literary agent, I'm so excited to learn from you and hear about your books and just welcome.
Thank you. Well, first off, thank you so much to Series Writer, to Bethany, to Melissa for even having me on here. It's a true pleasure. All of you are a fun group of people. Working with Series Writer is one of my all-time favorite things to do, just because everyone's so nice. The content is straightforward. It's easy to digest and very industry appropriate right now. So I'm thrilled to be on here, and even though I can't see all of your beautiful faces, I had the pleasure of talking with some of you before this, and I just really enjoy all of your company. So today we're going to be talking about branding and kind of how that connects to the author journey. If you were at the North Carolina Christian Writers Conference, you might have sat in on this workshop, but don't leave if you had, because I'm sure that we'll cover some new topics and answer some different questions. So it'll be a really good thing. So the title of our workshop today is You the Protagonist, Developing Your Character/Author Brand. Now, I'm sure as writers, if we hear the word branding, some of us might roll our eyes or just think, okay, I don't want to have to do that. I just want to work on my book. Yeah, we don't want to have to, we hear social media marketing. We're like, oh no, don't talk about that. So today I kind of want to put those eye rolls and that feeling aside and focus on something that we actually know and that we love. And that's characters, that's stories, that's character development. Because the truth is, all of us are protagonists in the story that's been authored for us. So all of us are characters in our own story. Whether we are intending to or not, everything we do is creating an author brand. So the key is to be intentional about the brand that we're creating. Branding isn't just social media. Branding encompasses everything, whether, we're speaking at an author event or, how we present ourselves on social media, on our website. It boils even down to our color scheme and things like that. So everything we do is creating a brand. So we really want to be intentional about that. But kind of switching gears, to relating that to characters, a lot of our favorite characters even have a strong brand. Let's take Frodo Baggins, for example. If Frodo Baggins created a GoFundMe page, about help fund my trip to Mordor, we'd have kind of an idea of what his brand would look like. He has a clear call to action. He's trying to deliver the ring to Mordor. And we know that he is humble and he is chivalrous. We kind of, even in color scheme, we know that he's like green and brown. He has this cute little hobbit, earthy tones. We get an idea of who Frodo is and why we should care about him just by reading the Lord of the Rings series. Same thing goes with Katniss Everdeen. I think Katniss has a really strong brand. She's the girl on fire. You know, I volunteer as tribute. We know what she stands for. We know why she's doing what she's doing, why we should care about her. Even she has a color scheme. You know, she's the girl on fire. So, and you know, even with her braid, like I'm kind of channeling the Katniss braid right now. We kind of have an idea of who Katniss is and what she stands for. So thinking about characters will really help us start to think about our personal brand, how we're portraying ourselves to the world, and kind of the who, what, and why. Like, why should people care about us? So I'm going to move on kind of, I guess, into some introductory questions. I can't see all of you, so asking to raise your hand would be kind of silly, but just think about these. So what makes a memorable protagonist? When I ask this question at conferences, people will go around the room and just throw out some different descriptions of what they think makes a memorable protagonist. They'll say maybe quirky, relatable, honorable, realistic, maybe flawed. They throw out these different descriptions. And when it boils down to it, so are we. You know, we also have all those different descriptions that describe us. And so when you're thinking about your brand, start kind of coming up with some descriptions of what do people say about you? You know, who are you? Because branding, before we can even talk about social media, we have to get that foundational who, what, and why. Who are we? You know, what are we offering? And why should people care? Why should people buy into the message that we're trying to sell? And so come up with these descriptions. Another question to think about, you know, besides how to describe yourself, like why should people care about your message? Because branding and social media, it isn't just about us. I think one of the most detrimental things that a writer can do is to over promote themselves. You know, if they release something, they're like, buy my book. You know, they're just constantly me, you know, buy this, do this. And to a consumer or to the person following you, they're going to see that as not being relatable or, you know, not being genuine. So a simple way that you can promote yourself and kind of fix that wording is, let's say you have a book coming out. Instead of saying, oh, buy my book, it's on Amazon, here's the link, it's $19.99. You could say, shout out to so-and-so for designing this really great cover. I can't wait to see it in print whenever. The link is in my bio if you want to know more. So just changing the language, because just like just kind of a random little marketing tip, I guess, consumers don't like being told what to do. They want to think it's their idea. And so how we engage on social media, we want to have that constant exposure. You know, we want people to see us on social media, to hear about our content, but we have to give them a reason to care, and we have to let them think that it's their idea. So it sounds a little sneaky, but the goal of branding and social media is to create connections, not just to sell people things, because genuine connections will ultimately sell more books than anything else. In publishing now, I'm kind of getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but one of my mottos in publishing is books are accessories to their messages. People are going to buy your work because they like you, not just because they like your book. Now, this isn't always the case, but in how marketing in publishing is done nowadays, a lot of it's taking the emphasis off the book and putting it on the message of the book and putting it on the author. And so that's how social media and branding should function. You're trying to connect with people. So through that connection, people are going to want to be loyal to your work. Moving on from there, I'm going to kind of explain a little bit about the who, what, and why of branding, break it down, and we'll have time at the end of all this to answer questions. But the first is branding projects who you are to your target audience. Now, whenever I talk about branding at conferences, a lot of times people think that they have to create a persona, or they have to be someone that's going to attract people's attention and be someone almost like they're not. You know, they get this like the Kardashians, or like, oh, I have to be this influencer. I have to like act this way or be over the top or be engaging. But just like all the descriptions that describe characters that we love, we don't have to be something we're not on social media. Because even if you're an introvert who likes to curl up in your chair with a cup of tea and your cat, you know, there are people just like you out there who are going to see that and think, oh, this person's being authentic. I'm loving what they post. There's a community here. You know, this is a safe place where I get to be me with this person, and then they'll buy into that. And so knowing who you are and starting to try to convey that through your content is so important. So effective branding projects who you are to your target audience. And a target audience is just a fancy word for saying your potential readers, like who's going to be most likely to read your stuff or to follow your blog or to engage with you. So that's kind of what a target audience is. Another aspect of branding, effective branding sets expectations, it builds community, and it fosters growth. By setting expectations, if someone visits your website, they should be able to expect the same thing from your website as they would from their social media. By that, I mean there should be a similar tone, a similar color scheme. They should understand, like Bethany does a really great job with that. Like Bethany's a mom, she's a business owner, she's a publishing boss. And so everything on all her social media is kind of catering to that message of who she is, and she's reaching other people who are doing the same thing. And so it sets expectations. If someone goes to your Facebook page, what should they be expecting to see from you? For example, if you are posting like coffee and book pairings, where you're like, oh, like this Colombian coffee goes great with my favorite rom-com. And then all of a sudden you throw in a picture of your dog and then like have nothing that ties into that. If you're able to create a caption that somehow relates to your usual coffee and book pairings, awesome. But if not, it probably would be best to omit that, because you're kind of going against that initial expectation that your followers are going to have from you. Now, granted, to every rule, there's an exception, and I want to put that little disclaimer out there. Anytime you listen to any writing workshop, or let's say you go to a conference, a lot of times people will be teaching the rules. They'll be saying what normally works, good things to know, but every rule there is an exception. So just like when I talk to authors, I'm like, okay, it'll usually take about a year or more to sign a book contract. A lot of times writers will be like, oh, my friend got a book deal in 2 weeks. Like, awesome. That's an exception to the rule. And same thing with social media. I was on a panel with Angie Thomas, who's the author of The Hate You Give in Atlanta. And we were talking about branding, and I was like giving social media tips. And she said that she's very blessed because she has such an established following. She's like, I could post a picture of my foot and I'd have 500,000 likes on the photo. And for her, that's an exception to the rule. Like, just like the Kardashians, you could have Kim post something and millions of people will like her photo, and it doesn't have to connect to her brand. But when we're starting out as writers and we're trying to build that strong foundation, we have to be really intentional about the content that we're releasing. So sets expectations, it builds community. Everything that you're posting should invite people into your journey. It should spark conversation, have some sort of takeaway, engagement. So if you let's say you are posting on Instagram, in your caption, it should be something personal about you, but it should also have some sort of takeaway. Like, what kind of value is a person going to glean from your work? And how are you going to invite people into that conversation? And so start thinking about that. Also, effective branding fosters growth. Branding never stops. Even once you create a strong foundation, it's just going to keep kind of growing from there. And so, you always have to be thinking about how you're going to be taking your next steps kind of in your platform growth, in your branding journey, whether that's starting to speak or whether that's trying to build an audience on a new platform. It would be strategic. Publishing, social media, branding, it's kind of like playing chess. You have to be really strategic. I wish it was honestly a little bit more like chess, because the rules seem to be ever changing. The moment I feel like I learned something, everything changes. I'll be honest. Instagram, it took me years to try to figure out. I grew my following in 2 years from 500 followers to over 17,000 organically. Wow. But then last year, the algorithm changed and I lost 1,000 followers. So it kind of come back from that has been very difficult. But social media is ever changing. I think Twitter is the only platform right now that has a pretty pure algorithm overall. And so it's important to try new things, because new social media, new platform opportunities are popping up all the time. And so being aware of those opportunities and tapping into them and just seeing if it's a good fit for you. It's always a great thing. Lastly, an effective brand pinpoints your place in the market. A lot of you are very familiar with publishing. If you've been a part of the Serious Writer family for a while, you've probably heard this before, but knowing your place in the market is so important. If you don't know your genre, if you don't know your comparable titles, books that have been published within the past 3 to 5 years, you want to look into that, because being able to know your place in the market and convey that through your own brand will help publishers see, oh, this person knows who their possible readers are. They know how to reach them. And so publishers are going to be more willing to kind of stake their name with yours, because they'll know that you understand the industry and the market. And so if you don't know that already, if you don't know your place in the market already, I would recommend going to a bookstore and finding a place on a shelf where you think your book would be shelved. Look at books that are being sold in that area and start adjusting your brand accordingly. For example, if you write like dark thrillers, you probably don't want to be like catering your social media to children. Thinking like that. Or if you're writing for women, you probably don't want to be catering your social media predominantly to men. And so just start thinking about that. I know for me personally, I love Instagram because I write YA. And so a lot of my YA readers, they're on Instagram. And so that's how I reach them. That's how I engage with them. I know Bethany's doing this too, but we're trying to work with TikTok. TikTok's been funny. Bethany's been doing a really great job. She's been very consistent. And I know Cyle has even been trying to do TikTok. So trying new things, trying to reach your readers. But knowing your place in the market will really help you start to figure out that who, what, and why of your brand. Who are you? What are you trying to sell? And why should people care? So I'm going to move on to aspects of a brand, and then I'll look at the Zoom chat and we can dive into a discussion. And so some aspects of a brand. We've already kind of covered target audience. So target audience is possible readers. It's important to know who these readers are and where they're hanging out, and also what they like. I know for me, it's been a really long journey to figure out how to best engage with readers. It's been kind of an experiment. I knew that Instagram was a place to go for me for writing YA. I thought, okay, maybe if I am a bookstagrammer, I'll get a lot more engagement. A bookstagram, if a lot of you don't know, it's a hashtag on social media. You can type it into like the search engine on social media platforms. It's hashtag bookstagram, and it pulls up this whole portal of writerly things. A lot of readers use that hashtag to talk about their favorite books. It's a really great hashtag to use and to explore. But for me, I was trying to copy some of the bookstagrammers, and my content just wasn't going anywhere. And so I took a step back and realized that I am not a captiony person, meaning I'm not quick when it comes to little short clips here and there. I realized that my strength was in the longer captions and just trying to be honest with people. And so I started posting more personal things that had like a literary twist to them, that had some personal angle. And I realized that started having a lot more engagement. And so they're still reaching the people that I wanted to reach. And so I kind of built my brand off that I wanted to be a little bit lifestyle, a little bit author, but really focus on celebrating the story, not just that I'm writing, but also that we're all living. So my brand motto became live a story worth telling, write a story worth reading, and on the business side, advocate a story worth sharing. So that kind of became my brand that I've tried to grow off of. And so knowing your target audience, having personality. So all of you have beautiful personalities. Know how to convey that through your social media. Like if you have a corgi and you love taking your corgis on long walks, and you try new recipes, like those are fun things that you can incorporate into your brand. So your author brand doesn't have to just be book content, but it's figuring out how to connect the book content to the lifestyle content. So have your personality, because people are going to fall in love with that. They fall in love with that first. Have some personality. Voice. Now voice is super important. I'll tell a little personal story. When I was in college, I was taking a journalism class with very strict professor. Her mom was a Nazi in Nazi Germany. Like she was a hardcore person. Loved her, and she was brilliant, but just hard to please. And she pulled me aside one day after a blogging class, and she told me that she said, you call yourself a professional writer. She's like, but I expect more from you. Like, this isn't good enough. And I was shocked because I'm a type 3 person. I'm a people pleaser. So when she kind of scolded me a little bit, I was a little crushed. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what did I do wrong? And she said, your social media voice is very different from your novelist voice, which is very different from your public relations voice. And she's like, I don't know. What is your voice? She's like, what do you actually sound like? So she sent me off on this like 6-month journey to try to figure out what is my voice. Because I knew that if people were following me on social media, more than likely it was because maybe they've read my books or maybe they've met me in person. And so I wanted to be able to combine my speaking voice with my novelist voice, because if people have read my books, they're going to expect some of that in the way I'm communicating on social media. And so playing with voice in your brand is so important, because if you have a business background, you don't want us to come across business always on your social media. You want to bring in that personality. You know, if you are a writer and you are writing fiction, you know, can you bring in some of that novelist voice into your social media writing? So when people read your work, they're like, oh, this is her voice or his voice, but I can also see that her or he wrote the novel that I love or the book that I love so much. So thinking about voice, experimenting with that, it's great. Again, a lot of these little tips, it's not going to be an immediate thing. It's going to take some practice. It's going to take some trial and error to see what works, what doesn't work, what is you and what's not you. Even with the pictures you take. I mean, there might be some pictures you'll post and you'll look back and think, okay, that does not align with the brand that I'm trying to build, and that's okay. So me talking about these different things, it's not to create some level of expectation that you have to meet. It's more of just to offer some food for thought as you begin this journey, because publishing is not a perfect equation. Being a writer is not a perfect equation. You know, there's a lot of failure that has to come involved, and failure isn't a negative thing. You know, there's a lot of, you have to kind of trip before you can figure out how to walk straight again, you know, if that makes sense. And so just start playing with this, try to figure out the who, what, and why, and what that sounds like. So know your voice. Another aspect of a brand, color scheme. This is kind of a little like cosmetic thing, but it's so important. For example, if you are writing that dark thriller genre, you probably don't want to have a brand where it's like all pink and pastel blue, you know, and swirly font. You know, that might not connect to your brand. Maybe it could if you play with it enough, but for the most part, you have to start thinking, okay, what's my color scheme? For me, I now write YA with a more historical romance feel. Before that, I wrote dystopian. So a lot of changes going on. But for my own personal color scheme, I'm trying to transition more into the reds and the golds and some of that vintage, like brown kind of look, because I know that's going to match some of my upcoming book covers and they'll match some of the tone of my story. So even with nonfiction, think about what colors are on your covers if you have had publications. You know, and if you don't have a publication, start thinking about, okay, what color best fits the tone and the content that I'm releasing. So I know it sounds silly, but when I was living in Nashville, I visited a friend, and at her apartment building, I got in the elevator and there was a guy in the elevator. We started talking. Turns out he was Justin Bieber's social media manager. So I asked him, do you have any social media tips? This is Nashville for you. I mean, I met Miranda Lambert. I mean, you just walk down the street. I mean, Keith Urban, I've seen Keith Urban so many times. You just walk down the street and you're like, oh, hi, famous person. Just kind of how it is. But I asked, what are some social media tips? And this guy said, quality over quantity. Color scheme matters. Quality of photo matters. Being consistent, and that's another one of the aspects of a brand. You know, if posting every day isn't feasible for you, that's okay. If posting once a week is more attainable, that's great. Just make sure whatever you're posting aligns with your brand. You know, it does have your color scheme. It's a quality image, that you've really worked to make sure that everything about what you're posting is going to connect to your brand. So having that consistency. So quality over quantity, know your color scheme. So that's a little fun tip. With, I guess it's a mild flex, but yeah, Justin Bieber social media manager said that. It's another thing. You want to have a message takeaway. I mentioned that before. If you're posting something on social media, try to have some kind of call to action, whether that's, you know, asking a question, like just getting them to comment on your post. That's still a call to action. You don't have to say comment below. You can ask questions or try to get people to engage. Let's say you do love to walk your corgi and bake. Let's say that's like some things that you love to do. Maybe you can start posting recipes. Weirdly enough, recipes do really well on social media. If you're writing fiction, come up with some recipes that kind of go along with your book. I posted a scone recipe that I kind of made up the other day for a little quarantine tea party that I had with my siblings. It's really fun. If you have kids, I highly recommend. But I made these scones. So I posted the recipe and I had over 1,000 likes on a photo of scones. People just like the recipe. So offering anything, any kind of content, whether that's, let's say that's something you've learned, there's something we've learned in publishing recently. You can share that, some kind of takeaway, something that adds value. We were talking about consistency, unity, make sure everything matches, and have that call to action. So those are some aspects of a brand. I want to leave time for us to dive into questions, and so I can read all your comments. But just some key things to remember. Books are accessories to their messages. Your social media isn't about you, it's about your follower. And an effective author brand generates book sales. I just want to encourage all of you, you're where you need to be. I know in the season of quarantine and all this stuff going on in the world, I know it's really hard to kind of feel like we're not doing enough, or if we wake up one day and we just don't have the motivation to do all the writerly things or to manage life and work and then try to bring in writing into that. I know it can be a lot, but you're on the right track. And that's an important thing to remember. One thing that always helped me was this one quote I think I saw on social media, that we can't compare someone else's middle to our beginning, and we can't compare someone else's end to our middle. And that's just an important thing to know. I've been doing this since high school. I've been doing this for a really long time. I've been working with publishing with books probably like over half my life, and I've loved it. It's been a really great thing. But there have been so many moments, even when I've been at conferences and sitting on panels and talking with big authors and having a seat at the table, where I felt like I haven't belonged there. And so if you feel that imposter syndrome, that's okay. You have a spot at the table. We're all in this together. And with branding is that foundation of just to help you start to take those next steps. And Bethany knows this. In publishing, publishers are looking for authors who know their audience. So it's not always about numbers. And so that's an important thing to know too. If you're writing nonfiction, different publishers will have different numbers when it comes to that, like how much platform you need to have when it comes to nonfiction. But overall, just taking those steps now is going to help you in the long run and really help publishers to see your value, not only as a writer, but just as a business person. You have to advocate for your book first. And as an agent, I want to be a gladiator for writers, but it's hard for me to champion writers if they don't champion themselves first. And so I just encourage all of you to champion yourself, to believe in your writing, and start to convey that through social media. So I want to leave some time so we can dive into some different questions. I'm going to scroll through here.
This was awesome. And before we jump into Q&A, I want to go back to something that you mentioned.
Yes.
Because marketing comes way before the book deal. I know everyone I'm sure
Oh,
you
yeah.
heard the conferences too. My mom's heard it as well. Like I can't start marketing because I don't have the book. But yeah. I love what you said about, because a book cover's coming out, or if you're writing on a certain topic, you're already gearing social media that way, because that's what you do. That's what actually helps turn that into sales or into proposal numbers or whatever you're going for, because you're doing it now. Like you don't read the book, do it ahead of time. I'm so glad you said that.
It's casting a vision. I think that's what social media is, because you're not only casting a vision for you to see, but for readers to see, for publishers, agents. If someone Googles you, things should start popping up, and they should connect, so that people can start to see that vision and they can start to buy into it. And just like what Bethany said, I'm starting to think about covers, and even when I was writing the book, thinking about how does branding connect to this? Like, how would I start to grow my brand off this? So even if you're working on a book right now, start thinking about that. Start thinking about, okay, what are some ways I can market this? Or, how can I start to talk about different topics that might connect to this book now? to start to create that foundation that will generate sales later. So publishing, the timeline, I mean, you start working on it months and months and months in advance. I have a book coming out next February. We should have advanced reader copies in a few months. I mean, I haven't even seen the cover. Like, I've seen some sample covers, but we don't even have official cover yet. It's going to line editing, but marketing is already being talked about this far in advance. I had some chapters in BuzzBooks 2020 that just came out, which is really exciting. But I mean, we were my editor and I were trying to work to get those chapters done and submitted to BuzzBooks so it can even come out like a year before the book even releases. So thinking about that, I mean, publishing already functions on that timeline. So branding should function on that timeline too, because it's a long process. It is. Let's see.
Lots of good comments in the chat. Mom, are you paying attention to
yeah,
you grabbing questions?
Yeah, and Melissa had a really great question. It was actually one I was thinking about too. Are there special techniques or exercises you can do to figure out how to bring your voice across all platforms?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's a deep question.
That's a really great question. And I think a lot of that kind of goes down, let's say you're writing a fiction book and you're trying to figure out your character voice. A lot of the exercises that you do for a character, you can do for you as well. I know that's what really helped me start to figure out my voice, was to do for myself what I've done for my characters. I know with writing YA, or really just writing fiction in general, voice is a big component of a good fiction project. And so experimenting with that. So I mean, even if you start writing like fake captions or like little blog entries, or just experimenting with it in a Word document. From writing something long, try to start writing something smaller. How would you take the voice that you've applied to a larger piece of work? How would you boil that down and convey that in a Twitter post? And so just experimenting with it. And some of that, if it can go back to how would you describe yourself? How would you speak? Speaking things aloud really helps, just to try to capture your voice, because you do want to sound like you. Even if you're trying to be strategic about bringing in the voice of your book, you still want to sound like you at the end of the day. So just keep playing with it. There's no specific answer to that question, other than the only way you're going to learn is if you start practicing, and just to keep working at it until you find the voice that you believe is truly you. But yeah, that's my answer for that question. It is a subjective thing. Yeah.
And just to write, I think that, just write and write and write and write.
Yeah, that's really it, right? Even if it's just a little publishing tip, once you finish a book, start on another book.
Yeah.
Don't stop writing. Because you might have a lot of books on your computer that never see the light of day, and that is okay. Because with every book that you write, you're going to get better. If you pitch to an agent, and let's say you're pitching and you just haven't been able to sell in one book, shelf that book and you can pull out one of your other ones and see if that one does better. And so just keep writing. Practice makes perfect, truly. Writing, a lot of things in writing can be taught, but personally, I really believe that a writer truly learns how to write by reading and by just writing and learning from their mistakes. And so never stop writing. I know even where I am, like, I'm having to work on a new book before I even get the go ahead from my publisher on this next book that we're working on. So it's the kind of thing where you just have to just keep writing. That's it. It's really that simple. But do you have any other questions before we move on?
More comments, I think, than questions, unless I've missed something. So I wanted to go, there's a couple here.
Rhonda.
Yes, Rhonda.
Makes me feel like I'm shooting at a moving target. Hitting the bullseye takes practice, and that's a great way to describe it. With social media, it's a fickle thing. Some hashtags work, some hashtags don't. You might have a post that does really well on Facebook, and then you post something else and it flops, even if you do the exact same thing. Yeah. I'll reference Instagram a lot just because that's something I've really been working with. But I can post something on Instagram, have a caption that I've worked on and meticulously. I've picked all the hashtags that I think are going to best represent the photo. I think the photo's engaging enough, and I'll post it and it'll do really well. And let's say it'll get like 700 likes, and I'll be like, okay, great, this photo did really well. And then I could post a photo with just as much time and effort into the caption, just as much thought into the hashtags, and it could totally flop.
Yeah.
And so but being consistent. I mean, if you have one bad post, that's okay. And consistency really is key there, and just engaging with your followers. I think at the North Carolina conference, I mentioned this, but if you have a Facebook page that, let's say you sold Mary Kay, and you have a Facebook page that has 10,000 followers for your Mary Kay products, those followers wouldn't most likely translate into publishing sales. And so those followers wouldn't be as valuable as, let's say you had 300 followers on Instagram who are writers or readers or who are interested in your book and who engage with you on a regular basis, and are more than likely to purchase your work. Like, those 300 followers will more than likely be more valuable than, let's say, the 10,000 Mary Kay followers. And so keeping that in mind, you don't always need huge numbers. Engagement is number one for publishers. And I think publishers know now more than ever that because social media is ever changing, that the value has shifted. The like function, let's say for Instagram, for example, the like function in a lot of countries has been disabled. So you actually might be getting more likes on your photos than you realize, especially if they're from people overseas, because Instagram is trying to take away power from the influencer. So for the past few years, companies would pay users on social media who had large followings to post about their products, because it's that product placement. Just like in the book community right now, they'll do these like social media tours. The publishers will organize these social media tours where they will send advanced reader copies or copies of books to different social media users. Those users will post pictures of the book on social media, and it's just that product placement. And so the same thing goes like with companies contacting influencers, and they would pay these influencers to post about products. Now Instagram sees this and want that money. Like, they don't want companies paying this third party to promote the product. They want those companies to come directly to Instagram. So a lot of algorithm now, like the algorithm is just how the platform's working. And so a lot of changes have been made. So you might not be getting as much engagement on your social media because of that. And so publishers understand that. So engagement is number one priority, not always the numbers of how many followers you have. Oh, so these comments are funny. Oh,
yeah,
yes,
let me go back to a couple other things here.
Sure. Yeah.
They're kind of related, I think, in a little bit. Rhonda had said earlier she fears that what's interesting to her doesn't interest a lot of other people. She's a niche person in a Walmart world. And then Isabel, who is our international person who joins us from France each week, which we love, says, as a bilingual wishing to write for both markets and sharing in 2 languages. She also wondered how to, to fill that niche. So two things there that kind of go together. I'm kind of with Rhonda. I always feel like, oh, I'm interested in that, but I don't think anyone else is going to be, So.
I think you'd be surprised. I read, because I mean, with publishing, publishers want same but different. By same, they want something that has a clearly defined audience that they can market to, but different enough to capture attention. So I understand the Walmart aspect. They're like, okay, we need something general enough that we can appeal to the masses, but having something that's more niche is not a bad thing, because there's a lot of people who enjoy those different topics. So even if you have a general message, but you're able to bring in those things that interest you, it kind of connects to that personality. I know I started posting little vintagey, I love like vintage things. Like I love like old clothes and things that made me weird when I was in high school. I went through an insane vintage phase in high school. Like I'd go to school like wearing like 1950s dresses. Like it was a thing. Like I was weird like in high school for doing that. But now I started posting it just for fun to see what happens. People loved it. And then you have those people posting about like they love historical things, and so they're posting pictures of their historical clothes and like different things that have like Jane Austen aesthetics or old typewriters that they found in thrift stores. And so something that you think is might not be of interest, there is a whole community out there who's more than likely interested in the same thing you are. It just takes some of that time and effort to do the research to find them. I even know there's a guy over in England. His I think username is Dandy something, but he only wears like Regency era clothes and like Victorian era clothes. And and I didn't think anyone would be interested in that, because he just posts pictures of like things that he's made, and his funny clothes, and people have loved him. Like I think he has like hundreds of thousands of followers now because people have liked this like very like niche thing that he's developed. So I would say don't be afraid of posting about what you're interested in, but make sure that it does connect to your book or the message that you're trying to convey. And so, I mean, if you are, let's say you are writing a rom-com catered to women, and you think, okay, I want to talk about my rescue dogs, but okay, how do I connect that to writing rom-com? You know, so thinking about like, if you want to talk about something that's like niche and personal that doesn't relate to your book, try to find a common thread. And with branding, I think that's always the biggest challenge. And I'm sure Bethany can agree with this. When you have all these different things, let's say you're wearing all these different hats, you're juggling all these different positions, you know, you're thinking about, okay, who am I? Like, how does this connect to this? You know, it takes some strategy to think, how does my love for corgis connect to my rom-com book? Or for me, I struggled with thinking, okay, I want to post lifestyle stuff, but how does this connect to like YA historical romance? Like, how does this connect? And so really, even if you sit down with a pen and a pad of paper and just start almost diagramming, writing out all the things that you like, the messages you're trying to convey, you know, even if you do like little categories of who, what, and why, and really break it down and look for those common elements, those common message. And if you can, I like to refer to it as an umbrella. Like if you can create a mission statement that all these little things can fit under, it can still unify that brand. It's like tying a nice little ribbon on it. And so if you can come up with your mission statement as a writer, you know, as a business person, because that's what you are. You're not just a writer, like you're an advocate, you're a business person. So coming up with that branding mission statement that encompasses all those other little small things will really help be able to bring in the niche with that Walmart, that general market element to it. What was the other question? I get off on these tangents. Thank you so much for bearing with me.
Isabel talked about, she's, like I said, she's from visiting us
Yes.
from France
Yeah.
and writing in 2 languages. And what else did she say? For both markets, bilingual, wishing to write to both markets and sharing in 2 languages.
Ooh,
That's
really
hard. Yeah.
It is hard, but there is a market for that. And I think that even, I think there's a whole brand you can build off that, because I think people would be interested to know kind of your process with writing for both markets, you know, the cultural differences that you see, even just your life in France. I know as Americans, we're all like, oh, please tell us about your life in France. Like, I'm actually writing a book right now that's set in Paris. So
we want to know
about that. I would follow you, especially if you're posting like photos that kind of combine that literary aspect, you know, with France and with kind of your process with writing. I mean, even if you write your captions, like have one section in French, have one section in English, you know, to bring in that cultural aspect to it. I think that would be a really beautiful way to build up your brand. I would follow you because I'm like, I want more France in my life. So I think really just, you know, you don't have to think about being, like I said, being someone you're not. I think really looking at who you are, like the journey that you're on, and what interests people about that journey. You know, even if it's those little small things that you don't think will interest people, more than likely it will. So I think you have kind of a sure brand right there. And send me, contact me, and I'll follow you because I'd be curious.
I want to add on to that, because if you guys remember the days of Periscope, which I was going to say 3 years ago, but it's way longer than that. It's always 3 years in my mind. But there was a guy, and he lived in Paris, and he never showed his face on camera ever. And he had more followers than almost everybody. And all he literally did would go live and walk the streets. And all of us just flooded to be in the moment with him and see people like on the thing. But he went into, I think he went to, I think it was, see, I'm so afraid I'm going to say a place that's not in Paris. Notre Dame.
And where?
I think he went into Notre Dame.
That's in
And so he was taking us through, and he would hold his phone down, and he was all whispered, and everyone was just, I mean, just because he was live, but he was showing things, places that I'd never be able to see.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see it on a video, but because it was live and we were all there at the moment, Isabel, you could do the same exact thing. We were all fascinated.
Oh, yeah. So I think that you have a sure win there. Is it?
Yes. We'll all follow you with your live stream.
I'll follow you.
Yeah,
Love that.
Absolutely. Apparently, she writes in lots of genres too, because she talks about rugby shorts or for the rugby kids books, historical romance, angelic fantasy, look at lemony snicket types. And then Leslie also asked about that, and that's an issue for me too. I write in multiple genres. It wasn't my choice. It's just what God gave me to do and the path I'm on. So I've written in not every genre, but I'm getting close.
Yeah.
And Leslie writes in historical and contemporary, and it does make it harder to decide what are you focusing on, but that's the contracts I'm getting and I'm not going to change. So, that's
well, congrats. If you're writing in multiple genre and getting contracts from multiple genres, that's huge, and congratulations with that. For a branding side, it kind of goes back to the umbrella. If you're writing for children and you're also writing for adult, what are some common messages, or like what are some common things that you can make that mission statement, that umbrella that you can put all those books under. And I know that's a challenge.
It is a challenge.
Because if you're trying to, let's say you write for children and you're trying to reach like moms and teachers and librarians and grandparents, but then let's say you also write nonfiction books that's, let's say, catering to something totally different. You have to try to think, okay, how do I create content that's going to appeal to both of these very different target audiences? And I think it kind of boils down to, is there a way to bridge the gap between those? Like, is there a message, or is there something that can unite those following? I will say, I had an experience with a gentleman at a conference in northern Georgia, and he was super sweet with me. He booked a long, it was an hour-long appointment he booked with me and to talk about his illustrated children's books. And his children's books were so cute. They had a Dr. Seuss feel to them. He illustrated them all himself, so they were really great projects. And then he revealed to me that he's a self-published author, and he writes murder mystery erotica, this thriller erotica, really dark stuff. And so, I mean, he kind of dropped the curveball on me afterwards, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't sell children's books if the author already has these very dark sexual books out on the market. That just won't fly. Publishers won't be into that. And so, making sure that if you are writing for children, make sure that your other books aren't dark erotica, please. That'll really help. But when it comes to nonfiction, writing fiction, if you can just find, even if it's just one small thing, one thing to unite both of those in your brand, I think that'll really help with your social media. And I will say, I know we're running out of time, but I will say that social media platforms, you can have a brand, but then cater each social media to maybe a different aspect of that brand.
Interesting.
So for example, Twitter for me is more business. That's where I engage with other writers. I don't see a ton of book sales through Twitter. It's more for industry connections. And so even though everything on there connects to my brand, how I go about it, or some of the content that I post, or who I engage with, it's a little different. So I'm kind of gearing that platform more to the industry side. Instagram is very YA, so it's not really professional at all. So if someone follows me there, a lot of times they don't really know I'm a literary agent unless they start kind of digging around. But I cater that to YA. So someone might look at that and think, oh, this is not very super professional. That's because I'm not trying to be professional. I'm trying to be real and relatable on that platform. And then Facebook is kind of a little bit of a mix of both. I'm still catering to readers, but my demographic for that is a little bit older. And so you can still have a brand and be unified in voice and content and such, but also be strategic in your mind of thinking, okay, who am I reaching on this platform? Because if you're writing for adults, let's say you're writing for adult women, empty nesters, Facebook might be a really great platform for you. But let's say you also still want to, you still want to be on other platforms. So I was thinking, okay, which platform, where are my readers hanging out? But how can I optimize other platforms to still grow my brand and still reach people and still ultimately increase the platform? So yeah, thanks for letting me go on that tangent.
All right. Well, what time? Oh, yeah. Why don't we let everybody come back in really quick, and we just will have a couple more minutes. Next week, Cody Moorhead is going to be here. Bethany, can you give us a little bit what he's talking about?
So this is going to be absolutely fantastic because Cody is so visual and creative and really amazing. He stays up to date with the trends, book covers, and things like that. And so he's going to be talking about really kind of unleashing that creative side, and then tips on how to take your brand and make it like marketable. So he'll have probably a lot of apps and tools to use for that. I'm super excited about it. He also started a Facebook group called, we're calling it Serious Writer Creatives, people who write but really go beyond the writing too, to kind of like open up that creative side. So maybe I'll put a link in the Facebook group for everybody. But it's gonna, and you guys, if you met Cody is always a good time.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah,
we love Cody.
Hop on, people, if you want to. Feel free to do that. I also am going to tell you all that Rhonda mentioned in the chat about using BookGrabbr, who we had on 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm not sure now when. And using it for her Instagram. And I went and looked at her Instagram, and she is doing a great job. So you want to follow Rhonda on Instagram. And she's going to be doing a 2-part presentation for us on Writers Chat about doing that in a couple weeks. So we have that to look forward to as well. Bethany, I am looking to get Darlene out of jail, so I'm going to let you take over for right now. I can't find her name. Did she leave? Oh, there she is. Okay.
Here.
Take over, Bet.
Well, if there's any more questions, you can go ahead and throw them in the chat, or go ahead if you want to ask Caroline directly as well. Like, I thought today was absolutely amazing. And anyone else excited to like kind of dig more into brand and test? I feel like you got to test your audience, figure out like Caroline was talking about. Not be afraid.
It's like a focus group. It's like a informal focus group. You're always testing with someone. I mean, even with family members, like if you have several photos, you're trying to decide which one to post. Even just asking family, like, okay, which one of these is most engaging, or which one of these do you look at and really makes you excited? Even trying that with your voice. I mean, if you can experiment with your voice, like write several different captions for, let's say, a photo, and just test it on your family. You can have little focus groups. And then from there, if you start posting things, start really paying attention to the insights. Pay attention to the numbers, who's engaging with your photo, what's getting the most engagement, and try to replicate that. I mean, again, you could post the same thing, or like you could do a similar thing twice and get different engagements, but you just have to start somewhere and start testing it and just start seeing like what's going to get people's attention.
I want to add on to that,
yeah,
especially on Instagram too, that making it a business profile, which is free, it doesn't create a separate page for you, it just creates your page's business. Those insights change everything. As you go more niche and kind of focus brand, you're going to lose followers, and it's the most upsetting thing in the whole world.
It's so frustrating.
I know, but I've been going back to numbers, and it's like daily I'm losing 80, gaining 40, and so I'm not replacing at the same rate. That's targeted people, it's organic people, and like I was getting upset watching that number drop, but if I hadn't gotten insights and analytics, it would have, okay, I'm still doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It's working slowly. So we have to remember. It is.
And I mean, as your brand changes, I mean, you will lose followers. I had a little bit of heartbreak the past few days. My followers dropped. I think I lost like 100, and I was still gaining like half of that. But I noticed it was because I posted a kind of a personal post because I just wanted to share about something that was nice in my life. But I talked about God, and I started noticing it. Anytime I like bringing my faith into it, I started losing followers, and I'm like, I'm not going to stop talking about that. But I had to understand that the more authentic I was going to get followers who also bought into that message and who also agreed with me, but I was going to lose people who didn't.
Right.
So if you're losing followers, just take that as in a way a blessing, because the people who are going to replace that more than likely are going to be more engaged and more loyal to the brand. And following other people, engaging with content is so big. I know on social media, I know Victoria talks about this a lot, but getting into pods is really helpful. Really just make little social media friends. I've made a lot of social media friends over the years, which is really fun when you don't know when you really don't know them that well, but you act like you know each other on social media. It's a good time. But yeah, if you lose followers, don't be discouraged. You're in this for a long haul. not the sprint. So
Yes.
I guess just keeping that in mind.
I will also say there's some things in the chat about finding good images. I'm going to talk about
Yeah.
good images when I do the class, and I'm really happy for this opportunity because I am one of those people who loves the artistic side of the writing profession. But one thing I did, you guys know if you follow me at all on Facebook or Instagram, I love castles. I think castles are so romantic, and they fit my brand. One of the things I did was just get on Instagram, look up the hashtag castles, and see who's the top poster, and just explored his feed. What does he, and just these amazing, people send him these amazing pictures. So I messaged him and said, hey, can I repost some of your stuff? And I'm serious. I get 25 likes. I'm ecstatic, okay? I reposted one of his castle pictures and almost 1,000 likes. Just
That's
boom.
amazing.
And because I tagged him, now I had permission. You have to have permission to use someone else's image.
Yeah.
But I tagged him. He commented on my post, and oh my goodness, the algorithm went crazy because he's one of those, big stars in that thing. So it doesn't have to be your original images all the time. If you interact with somebody and develop a relationship and ask permission, you can repost to something that you find really attractive.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, just a little side note, people do want to see your beautiful faces. So posting pictures of you, even if it's hard for you, I recommend that, even if it's every few posts you post something with you in it, even if it's you holding a book or something, people love seeing faces. I don't know what it is. I mean, just in general, because I've tried a lot of different things, and sure enough, anything that I'm in, more than likely is going to get more likes. And because people like that, they like the face to the name. And so do post pictures of you, even if you're posting other things. Make sure there's pictures of you that in there every once in a while, because that'll more than likely still get a lot of engagement.
All right. Well, I think we need to close, but thank you so much for all that. I mean, wonderful, wonderful information. Jeannie had to leave because of a meeting, but she texted me saying how great you are, and we just appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thrilled to have you. Thrilled to have you. Just a lot of great information. So thank you if you're here live. We always love you guys and appreciate you being here. If you're watching the replay, thank you very much. Just a reminder that you can join us live anytime on Tuesday mornings, 11 Eastern, 10 Central, here on this Zoom channel. And also an invitation to join our Facebook group. Just look for Writers Chat members, and there you are. Answer a couple questions, and we'll let you in. We will be glad to have you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.